Chapter 23. A narrow slit of morning light snuck through the shuttered window and onto Sam's twitching eyelids. In his dreams, images streamed and flashed. Swords, trees, moonlight, fireflies, Arabella, swirling cards, Letha, the wolf. Sam sat up into the cold with a start. His eyes traced the room. Stove, door, roof, cabin. It took a moment for Sam to remember where he was. The raised scar on his arm itched, telling him something. What it was, he did not yet know. He got the feeling he wasn't alone. A shadow cut quickly across the sunbeam. Feet tromped a fast rhythm in the snow outside. Sam got out of bed, pulled the shutter, and strained on tiptoe to look out. Seeing nothing, he pulled the shutter of the other window and was startled when a boy's face popped up. "You awake?" Two huge, excited eyes stared at him. Yeah?" said Sam. "Let me see if I can move the log." The boy disappeared. Sam heard grunting, wood barely sliding against wood, then the door timber thudding back into place. The boy's face returned to the window. "I can't hardly move it," he said with disappointment. "Wait! Hold on! I gotta get a leverage." Sam heard footsteps crunching in the snow, then sounds of dragging, wood piling on wood, and a sudden crash to the ground. The door burst open, revealing a muddy-faced lad with a smile from ear to ear, his knit cap barely keeping his unruly hair contained. "You're here!" he called out excitedly. Before Sam knew it, the boy was poking and prodding at him. "Look at your clothes! You're super fancy! Whoa!" Sam forgot he had fallen asleep in his New York City gentleman's clothes. "Where's your scar? Is it big? He didn't bite you on the butt, did he?" Sam tried his best to deflect the poking of the boy, but instead found himself giggling. "Stop that! I'm going to have to pee." "Did you really come into town with a Vatisse? Did you get to jump through the portal? Lucky! Did you bring anything else with you?" The boy moved away from Sam and into the cabin. He seemed disappointed that there was only Sam, until the pelt leapt from the bed and directly onto the boy. "There he is!" The boy rubbed and wrestled the pelt as it crawled up and all over him, taking him to the ground by wrapping him up in a flurry of fur. Sam's attention was drawn up and through the open door. He saw a wagon road leading down the hill away from the cabin. A warmly cloaked figure with a staff stood in the morning light. "Stuart, I should have known," Letha playfully scolded from afar. The boy peeked out from the cocoon of the pelt. "That's Grandma Letty," the boy said. "Don't worry, I'm her favorite. She's the only one what calls me Stuart. You can call me Stu, or Stewie. My friends call me Stewie." He pulled his hand out and waved. "Morning, Grandma Letty. I let him out of the cabin for you. Weren't no trouble." Stu pushed at the pelt. "Let me go now. I gotta go gentle, man, Grandma Letty." The pelt released him and jumped onto the bed. Stu trotted down the snowy trail and offered his elbow to Letha. As Stu escorted her to the cabin, Sam watched Letha's feet in awe. In this snowy winter landscape, she was barefoot. Just before each foot would touch the ground, the snow beneath melted away and she stepped on thawed earth. Her staff grew fast roots each time she placed it on the dirt, then drew them up as she raised it for her next step. "Weren't no trouble?" Letha grinned. "Wasn't any trouble," she corrected. "Wasn't any trouble," Stu repeated. "And you're nothing but trouble, my boy," she laughed as she arrived at the cabin, looking up to offer a greeting. "Good morning to you, too, young Sam." "To you too? Too?" Stu laughed. Letha eyed the pile of logs and stones Stu had used to pry the timber up and away to open the door. "What kind of contraption are you building now?" Letha asked. "A leverage," Stu answered with pride. Letha narrowed her eyes. "You're not going to leave that mess, are you?" she asked. "Course not," Stu replied. He quickly started tossing the smaller pieces of wood back to the wood stack. Letha turned to Sam, and he once again was momentarily hypnotized by her separate colored eyes. Her blue eye was as light and gray as her hair. "I hope Stuart didn't wake you. He can be a little enthusiastic," she smiled. "Did you sleep well?" Sam had to look away from her eyes before he answered. "You were in my dream, I think," Sam said. "Was I now? I hope I was nice." Sam searched his memory, but the details had already faded from his mind, as dreams do. "I don't really remember," Sam admitted. "Well now, Between your travels, your first night in the cabin, and the new moon, I'm surprised you had any dreams at all," replied Letha. There was a crash from the woods where Stu dropped the last of his leverage, a length of the dead tree. "All done," Stu called as he brushed off his hands on his pants. "So helpful," Letha said with a wink, before stepping inside the cabin. "Let's see if your fire's still going." Stu produced a small folded piece of paper from his pocket as he followed them through the door. "I made a list, Grandma Letty," he said. "Remember you said if I made a list I could come along with you into town?" "You actually made the list now, did you?" "Course I did, just like you said. We ain't never known of a new Jack coming into town. At least that's what Pa says. He says we should make things proper hospitable and all. I wrote down what I thought we needed because I wanted to make sure we didn't forget nothing going into town." "Anything," Letha corrected. "Anything. Forget anything," Stu repeated as he unfolded the paper. He held the creased page out for both Letha and Sam to see. There, in the best writing Stu could manage, was just T. Sam raised his eyebrows. "It's only one thing." "It's one important thing," Stu said seriously as he turned to Letha. "Isn't that right?" "Indeed, mighty important," replied Letha. "You already brought the syrup, I reckon?" Stu stared at Letha. He looked down at the paper in his hand, then slowly pulled a red cedar pencil out of his pocket. He put the paper on his lap and pressed more letters into it before holding it up for Sam to see again. Sam read aloud, "Tea, syrup." "Now it's two things." Stu was quite pleased with himself. "I won't forget now, Grandma Letty." Stu folded the paper and stuffed it back in his pocket. "Should we go get it?" he asked hopefully. "The syrup and tea?" Letha looked Stu up and down. It was hard to tell if Stu was trying to be helpful or trying to be trouble. Usually, it ended up being a little bit of both. "Stuart, I was thinking, would it be too much trouble for you to take Sam into town by yourself?" "Yes." Stu's eyes lit up. He couldn't believe his luck. He was supposed to be in school for a test on the Revolutionary War today, but that was more than 100 years ago, and Stu didn't think it had much at all to do with him anyway. He much preferred the stories and histories of the Jacks and witches. Those stories he got right from the people that lived them. He'd much rather spend an afternoon with Kofi or Amasa or Arthur if he was still here. The best stories came from the source, not some book that had history of the past on the binding. Stories in person were exciting, and the Jacks never quizzed him about the dates. Most exciting of all, he was right here, on day one of Sam's story in Forge. No book needed. What could be better than that? All of this had gone through Stu's mind in a split second before he answered with a smile. "For you, Grandma Letty, wouldn't be no trouble at all." "Wouldn't be any trouble," Letha corrected. "Any trouble." "You don't have anything more important to do?" asked Letha. Stu considered for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I'd think that Sam is the most important thing in Forge right now, Grandma Letty. Don't you?" "I suppose he is quite important. Question is, can you handle something this important?" "Of course, Grandma Letty." "Well, that would be helpful, Stuart. It means I could take my time today and drop in to see Alma, make sure she and the baby are well, then meet you back here." "I like being helpful," Stu smiled. For her age, Letha liked to think she was fun, but she knew she wasn't Stu fun. She fancied the idea of Sam spending a little time with someone his own age, and sending the boys on an errand or two was better than letting them wander aimlessly. "He'll be needing other things besides tea," Letha continued. "A couple shirts, boots. Having a bit of bread on hand from Mabel's isn't a bad idea. Could do with a knit hat and socks, work trousers and such. It's quite a bit." Letha looked at Stu, expecting him to add to his list, but Stu pointed at his noggin. "I got it, Grandma Letty. I know all what to get." Stu was still doing his best to contain his excitement at getting to bring Sam into Forge for the first time. It's not every day you get to show someone your hometown, after all. "Pa has me running errands today anyway. I can do both at the same time. That's even more sufficient." "Efficient," Letha corrected. "Efficient," Stu repeated. "More efficient." Letha looked back and forth to Stu and Sam several times before making up her mind. "Off you go, then," she finally said. "Be sure to stop by Rom and get him measured for those boots. He'll be needing them, no doubt. And back here before dark, with the tea and all the rest." "Of course, ma'am, of course." Stu let his smile creep out more than he meant to. Letha raised her voice a little to make sure Stu was listening. "Listen, Stuart. While the sun's already up, the moon won't be long. Even though it's just a sliver during the day, it could be a little strong for him. You bring him right back here if it's too much, yes?" Letha locked eyes with Stu. making sure he understood. It's important. Yes, of course, Grandma Letty. I'll bring him right back. And we'll be back 'fore dark, ma'am. Promise the truth. The pelt sat straight up, hoping to go too. Letha smiled. I guess you better go along too. Keep him warm and all, Letha said. Go on. The pelt leapt from the bed and onto Sam's shoulders and wrapped him up. Off you go then, Letha said to Stu. Stu bolted out the door in his excitement, leaving Sam standing, staring at Letha. Stu's head poked back in. Well, you coming or not? Sam followed Stu along the snowy wagon trail as it wove its way through the winter woods towards town. It didn't take long for the questions to start. Where'd you get your fancy clothes? Stu asked. Sam looked down at his black vest, still buttoned, and the matching dark coat and trousers that Fanny had given him. He did look a bit out of place in the snow. I got them from a friend of John's in Washington, D.C. Sam's foot slipped on the snow, making him do a quick dance step before finding his balance again. Whoa, here, walk in Grandma Letty's spots, Stu advised with a gesture towards Letha's footprints. He continued with the questions excitedly. From Fanny and Charles? Yes. You know them too? Sam gingerly hopped into the snowless steps Letha had left. I ain't never met them, but Charles will send a book up for me from time to time, him being one of the holders and all. The holders? You seen all the books, didn't you? In his house? John says it's like a library. In the front room, Sam recalled the wall of books as he entered their house. I guess. I ain't never been, Stu confessed again. He's got all the history and everything, for all the people of Forge and the Jacks and such too. He's one of the holders of history. He let me borrow one, Sam said. A book. Which one? You good at reading? I'm pretty good too, though I still gotta sound out some words sometimes. Writing's more tricky. When I'm doing my letters, I get my D's and B's mixed up, confessed Sam. Me too, Stu laughed. They always look right when I'm doing them. Sam understood. It was good to have a new friend. I gotta get better at my writing, Stu continued, so I can start giving Charles me and Pa's story too. Charles gave me Huckleberry Finn, Sam said. Huck Finn? I read that one. Tom Sawyer and a bunch of his other ones too. That Mark Twain's pretty good, huh? I like the frog story and all the pictures he puts in. Of all the things Sam could have in common with someone, he was surprised that it was a book that they both shared. They moved from under the scraggly winter canopy into open fields, where some cows and a few horses milled about, diving their snouts into the snow, looking for a leftover bit of growth. Sam was grateful for the steps Letha had left. He was able to stay out of the snow entirely. How does she do that? Sam asked. Melt the snow when she steps. You should see in the spring, Stu answered. Them footprints will be full of flowers. Not just Letha's either, all the witches. Sam stopped. All the witches? Of course. There ain't just Grandma Letty. Wait, you didn't think it was just Grandma Letty, did you? Stu answered. Every Jack's got one. They usually go together like brother and sister. Brother and sister. Sam suddenly felt mixed up inside. He missed Ruthie and Ben. He felt alone. Stu could sense something had shifted. Sam's silence hung in the still winter air. They walked the length of the field quietly until they reached a stone wall with a wooden gate. Stu opened it to let them through and latched it behind them. He stood with his hands on the gate for a moment. Sorry about your family, he offered. Stu took a breath to say more, but it didn't feel right. Instead, he quietly led the way across the next field, letting their footsteps fall uninterrupted for a while in the earth and snow. When he broke the silence, it wasn't another question. Instead, Stu offered something about himself. My ma ain't around no more neither. She got passed just after I got born. Sam took it in. The snow crunched beneath their feet as the two boys walked side by side, crossing into a warm patch of sun in the center of the field. Sorry about your ma, Sam said. Yeah, me too, Stu replied quietly. Grandma Letty's pretty good to me, though, you know, so I'm glad I got that. She seems nice, Sam replied. Stu seemed to be searching his mind. You can borrow my pa any time you need. It's no trouble. Stu paused, then smiled. I always wanted a brother. A brother, Sam thought. He had lost his family only 2 weeks ago, and had been in Forge not even a day. Yet Stu was already starting to make it feel like this could be home. Sam smiled. Would I be your younger brother or older? Sam asked. Don't matter to me. You're a little taller, so... Older? Even though I'm the smart one, Stu laughed. Sam laughed too. It felt good. Stu had a gift for making everything feel a little lighter. They both let the lightness lead them through a growth of well-trimmed trees, finally cresting a small hill. A slight wind made Sam put his hands into his pockets and his fingers encircled a tiny column. "Oh yeah, I forgot," Sam thought as he pulled it out. "What's that?" asked Stu, eyes wide. Sam pointed at the text on the wrapper. "Says right here, Tootsie Roll, but Fanny called it a midgie," said Sam. "She put a couple in my pocket before I left." "Is it good?" Stu asked. "Sure is," Sam replied. He pulled both the ends, slipped his finger under the wrapper, and pulled out the chocolate candy. "We can share it." "Really?" Sam pulled and twisted the roll apart and handed half to Stu. "It's a little chewy," Sam explained as he bit into his half. Stu put his up to his nose, then put it in his mouth. He immediately closed his eyes and smiled. "That's really good," he said. "Sure is," replied Sam with a smile of his own. For a split second, he felt like Fanny had her hand on his shoulder. Sam had been so focused on the candy that he hadn't noticed they were overlooking a small valley. Stu swallowed and gestured ahead. "There's town." Forge was laid out in the distance before them. A few sprawling two-story buildings along a short, slightly curved main street that led to a bridge stretching over a half-frozen river. Unlike the bustling streets of New York City, there were no electric streetlights, no people selling newspapers, and no motor cars. Across the river, instead of buildings taking up the skyline, a ridge climbed high, edged with naked winter branches stretching to the sky like roots pulling down the cold from the gods. The hillside looked as if it had been shaved. A swath of timber had been taken and piled along the edges. Against the open sky and snow, the smoke that leaned from each chimney made Sam feel warm. Its scent reached up the hill. Stu gestured again, this time toward the sky. "There's the moon, too." The thin sickle of moon rose to the southeast. It would chase the sun across the sky all day. Sam felt a warmth in his scar. Even with the washed-out palette of winter before him, the colors in the town seemed a little more vivid. Sam picked up the scents of bread, leather, and wood, and sounds seemed more distinct than mere moments ago. He glanced at Stu. He must feel it too, Sam thought. Among the sounds, there was a faint mechanical whining that seemed to be coming from the building by the river. "What's over there?" Sam asked, pointing. "The sawmill," replied Stu. "Got a circular saw a few years ago. Cuts a lot quicker now." Stu blinked. "Wait, you can hear it, can't you?" "Can't you?" Sam asked. "Nope," Stu said with a smile. "That moon's making you sharp." Sharp. That was exactly how Sam was feeling. Sam thought it was simply being in a new place that made everything more acute, but Stu insisted it was the moon. "Yeah, that's the moon, all right. You feeling all right? Not ornery or nothing?" Stu asked. Sam shook his head. Stu looked him up and down. "You look fine to me. Let's go." Stu smiled and led the way down the hill towards town. They were soon making their way straight down the narrow main street. While the morning cold kept most inside, Stu happily shouted to the few people starting their day. "Good morning." Sam got the feeling that Stu was quite pleased to be the one to show the new boy around town. Each person Stu greeted would linger on Sam for a moment or two, then bow to him. Sam would nervously bow back. He didn't recognize anyone's face, but each person felt familiar, and strangely, so did the town. A piece of him somehow felt as at home as back in South Carolina. "Sorry I'm not doing a proper introduction to everyone," Stu whispered. "It would slow us down too much, especially if we stop in there." Stu pointed to a small shop with a short, stocky red and white striped pole, the barber shop. Sam knew getting the dish took much longer than a haircut, and today Sam would be the dish. Sam smelled something delicious in the air, just as Stu took an exaggerated breath through his nose and smiled. "You hungry?" Stu walked up the steps to one of the shops and straight in the door without knocking. As they entered, Sam was struck by a blast of heat and the scent of baker's yeast. In front of them was a rack of rising dough, and further along toward the back, Sam saw a large brick baking oven. A lady had her back turned and called over her shoulder without ever looking up from her work. "Morning! I'll be right with you." "Morning, Miss Mabel," Stu called back. "Stewie, just who I've been looking for on this cold morning. My wood box is almost empty. Bring me a few more armloads from the back, would you, dear?" "Of course," replied Stu as he motioned for Sam to follow. Stu stepped all the way through the shop, past the brick baking oven, and out through a back door. Sam slipped again on the packed snow outside, flailing his arms before catching his balance on the substantial woodpile. His slick-bottom shoes from the city simply weren't cutting it here in the snow. Stu stacked wood into Sam's arms. "Miss Mabel will give us some cinnamon buns if we help. At least she usually does for me. I don't even think she noticed you," Stu said excitedly as he finished piling wood onto Sam. Stu loaded his own arms up and stepped inside with Sam close behind. He dropped the armload of wood with a splintering thud into the wood box, then watched as Sam did the same. When Mabel heard the second landing of wood, she called out from around the corner. "You got a friend with you today?" "Sure do," Stu called. "Good then," Mabel's voice carried from around the huge oven. "You should be able to fill that box faster." "Sure will," Stu called back as he and Sam stepped back outside. They were dumping their second load into the wood box when Mabel called out again. "You hear if Alma's still in labor, or do we have a new one?" "A girl," Stu called out. "A blessing for sure," Mabel called back. Sam could hear the happiness in her voice. "Alma's good?" "Yes, ma'am," Stu called as he and Sam went back outside for final armload. "I guess it was quite a night. I hear Arthur's new blood came into town last night, too," Mabel called out. "On a fancy carriage, even." Stu stared at Sam for a moment and smiled. "That's you she's talking about. She don't even know it's you in here with me," Stu whispered. "It was quite a sight from what I can tell," he called back. "You get a chance to get out there and meet him yet?" "Oh, yeah. Grandma Letty asked me to run out and grab a few things for the cabin, you know." "Oh, sure. No one's been in that cabin for a while. Let me wrap up an extra loaf or two to take up to him. He can leave them outside to freeze. They'll keep till spring as long as the squirrels don't find him. He'll be hungry after the journey. Let him know Mabel baked him. I want to make a good impression." Mabel hadn't once looked up from kneading the dough. Stu was having trouble containing his laughter. "Of course, Mabel. I'm sure he'd love that," he called back. "What's he like?" Mabel asked. "Is he handsome?" Stu's eyebrows went up. "Oh, very," he called back, giving Sam a wink. Sam tossed the final load into the wood box. He flexed his arms at Stu. "Strong, too," Stu called again, barely containing his laughter. "All done, Mabel. Filled the box up good. We both did." The smells of Miss Mabel's baking had worked their way down into Sam's stomach, tickling his hunger. During the whole conversation, Mabel had never looked up from her work, and with her back still turned and rolling dough, she once again called out to Stu, "2 loaves in the bag for the new Jack. And I left you a cinnamon bun in the paper there. One for your friend, too. They got raisins today." Stu grabbed the bag of bread and one of the buns from the front counter. He nodded to Sam to grab the other. Sam carefully picked up the cinnamon bun, wrapped in brown paper, managing to only drop one raisin from the folds as he turned toward the door. "Ain't a bad start to the morning, is it?" Stu said to Sam as his butt pushed the door to the bakery open. He called out one last time to Mabel. "Thank you, Miss Mabel." He made eyes to Sam to do the same. "Thank you, ma'am," Sam shouted. Mabel's ears perked up. She knew everyone in town, but she'd never heard that young man's voice before. Who's that? She finally pulled her hands from the dough long enough to turn toward the front door just as it closed, catching only a glimpse of Stu and Sam through her window. Back on the frozen main street of town, the warmth of the cinnamon bun was working its way through Sam. He had to force himself to eat slowly. "Good, ain't it?" said Stu. "Mm-hmm," Sam nodded as he chewed. Stu was glad to see Sam enjoying the treat from Mabel. "How long have you been here, Stu?" Sam asked. "In Forge?" "Long as I can remember," he said. "When was your proving night?" "My proving night?" Stu laughed. No. I didn't have a proving night. I ain't never been bit. Not a proper wolf bite, anyway, like you." "You don't have a bite?" Sam asked with surprise. "Well, I mean, I've been bit by lots of stuff. Garter snakes, horses, ducks, even an angry beaver once. But not proper bit, like you. I'm just the same as everyone else in town." Sam had seen John's scar, so he had assumed everyone in town was like them. "So people in town know about the..." Sam couldn't think about how to describe it, so instead he made a snarled face and raised his hands like claws, making a quiet rar sound. The pelt rose on Sam's shoulders, making Sam look taller. "Of course everyone knows," Stu assured him. "Not everyone got bit is all. The Jacks is the only ones that been bit," Stu confirmed. "That's why they're Jacks. Hopefully you'll be one too." "Hopefully?" Sam thought. "Are there a lot?" Sam asked. "Of Jacks?" "Jacks? Jacks?" Stu replied as he counted in his head. "I don't know, 12, 13. On their journey north, it was obvious to Sam that John's transformations were something to be hidden. Yet here was a whole town of regular folk that presumably knew all about John, Sam, and all the other Jacks. No doubt these regular folk knew about Letha and her magic too. The way word spread in small towns, they'd soon know all about Vidoma. "Where are they?" Sam asked. "The Jacks." "They're all out at the logging camp," Stu answered. "They'll come into town from time to time or send me or my pa out for supplies and all. But we're all just regular here in town. No Jacks." Stu pushed open the door to the next shop with his shoulder. "I was going to do your trousers and stuff next, but maybe let's do your boots first," he said. Sam felt a jerk backward that almost pulled him off his feet as he passed through the door. Getting his balance, he realized that the pelt had spread itself in the doorway and was trying to pull Sam back outside. Stu turned and rolled his eyes. "He don't like this store," he said. He gestured inside to the saddles, shoes, gloves, and other leather goods hanging from large nails on the walls. "Just have him wait outside. She'll only be a minute." "All right," said Sam. He stepped back outside and gently pulled the pelt off his back and placed it on the snowy bench outside the door. Sam said the only thing he could think of. "Stay?" When Sam re-entered the shop, his nose was filled with the pungent smells of tanned leather. From behind a waist-high table stood a man with dark olive skin, striking features, and a very full black beard. The man looked up from his work as Sam greeted him. "Morning, Mr. Rom. I brought Sam in for some boots," Stu called. "Morning, Stu," he replied. He looked Sam up and down. "Sam, huh? Back already? That was quick." Rom stabbed an awl into his table before offering his hand. "Nice to see you, Sam. Shoes off." Rom pulled out a large swath of thick leather and tossed it on the floor. "Let's look at your feet." The shoes Fanny had given Sam were fine shoes, if a touch big, but it was obvious they weren't cutting it in the northern ice and snow. Sam didn't want to slide his way through town. Sam pulled off his shoes and stood on the piece of leather. Rom took a grease pencil from behind his ear and traced each of Sam's feet. "Should have them ready in a day or two, well before you're proven," Rom promised. He gestured to Sam to put his city shoes back on. As Sam tied his shoelaces, he saw that Stu had managed to get his foot caught in a stirrup of one of the saddles laid on a sawhorse. "Just a sec," Stu said as he tugged at his boot. Rom rolled his eyes and reached down to pull Stu's boot out of the stirrup. Stu hopped a few times and caught his balance. "Thanks, Mr. Rom," Stu smiled. "Go on now, before you get yourself stuck in something else," Rom playfully chided. Back outside, the pelt climbed up onto Sam, who still had more questions for Stu. "So, your pa's not bit either?" Sam asked. "Nah, but he helps them out at camp, cooking and such. They call him Soup." Sam's father's name was Sam, and his father's name was Sam. As far back as he knew, it was all Sam's. His brain stopped for a moment. "Soup? Your pa's name is Soup?" He blinked. Stu nodded with a smirk. "Your pa's name is Soup," Sam repeated. "And you're Stu?" "Fun, huh?" Stu answered with a giggle. "Time for your tea." Stu held another shop door open. Sam stepped in and recognized Constance from the night before. It was good to see at least one familiar face this morning. "Well, good morning, Sam." "Morning, Miss Constance," Sam replied. There was no floor in this shop. Instead, a mix of clovers, grasses, and other low greenery covered the ground. Constance moved about the shop barefoot, yet she seemed to glide above the ground as she moved. Stu unlaced his boots and was soon barefoot and wiggling his toes in the green. Sam followed suit and kicked off his shoes as well. "Morning, Miss C.C.," called out Stu. "Grandma Letty said I may as well pick up some more tea since I brought Sam into town." "You brought Sam into town?" Constance asked with a smile. "Well, aren't you lucky? School's okay with it?" "Grandma Letty said bringing Sam into town was important," Stu replied. "That is true. I'm in the middle of a mix for Alma, so you'll have to give me a minute," Constance explained as she continued her work. "You stop by and see the baby yet, Stu?" "Not yet," Stu said. "They ain't much fun when they first come out." Constance let out a laugh. "They do get to be more fun as they go along. You turned out pretty fun, right?" Stu shared the laugh. "Sure did." Sam finally got his shoes off and his feet touched down on the green earth. Unlike the tingling that had been coming from his scar, the ground seemed to infuse him with a feeling of comfort. It was easy to relax here. Constance pulled clear jars of dried ingredients from the shelves and darkened clay pots on low racks. At the top of her staff was an impossibly balanced wooden bowl where she poured or placed the ingredients as she talked. No matter how many times she picked up and placed her staff, neither it nor the bowl ever hinted at falling over. Just like Letha's staff, it pushed down and pulled up roots with each movement. "How do you feel right now, Sam?" Constance asked. Is your scar itching much?" Sam had only noticed his scar once Stu pointed out the moon rising. He hadn't thought much of it since. "Not too much itching, really," Sam replied. "It tingles from time to time." Of course, the suggestion made him reach over and scratch it. "That's good," Constance reassured. "It's going to get a little worse as each day and night passes. You'll be wanting the tea tonight, no doubt, and a little stronger as we go. Did you sleep well?" she asked as she reached for another ingredient. "Fine," Sam replied. "No dreams?" she asked. "Some, I guess. I don't remember them so much now," Sam confessed. "It's still a new place for you, and no doubt new dreams too. I'm sure you'll remember more as you settle in," Constance assured him. "You'll be smart to start writing your dreams down. You might surprise yourself at what you already know." Constance scanned the shelves for Alma's last ingredient. "There we are," she said, opening a jar of dried black elderberry and dropping a couple pinches into the bowl. She walked to her shop counter and poured the herbs into a mortar. She took the pestle and beckoned Stu to come over, handing it to him. "Make yourself useful," she said. Stu took the pestle in hand and stuck his tongue out as he began to grind down the ingredients. Constance turned to Sam. "Now, young man, we should make enough for a day or two. Then we can change it depending on how you feel. Sound good?" Sam nodded. He wasn't quite sure what he was agreeing to, but Constance had been a comfort to him when he arrived in Forge last night, and he felt he could trust her. She looked Sam up and down. "I suppose we could start with Arthur's mix," she said. Sam felt a small rise from inside, a sort of familiarity with something. Constance offered Sam an empty wooden bowl. "Could you hold this for me?" She moved to each of the shelves and pulled a little of this and a little of that, placing each ingredient into the bowl in Sam's hands. The strangely familiar smells of each one filled Sam's nose. It didn't take long before she paused her work. "That's what we usually did for Arthur," Constance said as she put her hands on her hips. "Anything in particular that you feel like you need?" Constance gestured to the shelves of ingredients behind her. She had learned long ago that mixes were far more potent if the subject was allowed to pick a few of the contents for themselves. Sam glanced down at the bowl of aromatic items in his hands. He looked up at the wall of jarred herbs and powders in front of him. He searched his brain and remembered his mother used to boil horse mint when he and his siblings would occasionally fall ill. "Do you have horse mint?" Sam asked. "I do have horse mint." Constance traced her eyes down the wall and pulled out a large glass jar. The small, narrow-piped petals were faded from their usual bright pink to a dull gray. She tossed several into the bowl. "Anything else?" Sam shrugged his shoulders. "Why is everyone asking about my dreams?" he asked Constance. "Dreams ain't just dreams," Stu answered. "Aren't," Constance corrected. "Aren't just dreams." Stu stuck out his tongue as he pressed hard to grind Alma's ingredients. "They can talk to you that way, too, sometimes. In your dreams." "Dreams can be a glimpse or an insight into past, present, or future," Constance continued. "And especially for you, it could be a way that you experience your emerging with Arthur. It's not the only way, but it's one way, a common way." "She means Arthur can talk to you through your dreams," Stu summarized. "Smooth, huh?" Stu stopped grinding and thought for a minute. "Sometimes Miss Cece'll make a dream tea for me, and it helps me with seeing my mom again, even if it's just in my dreams and all." Stu smiled at Constance. Sam's mind started swimming with the idea that he could see his family again, even if it was only in his dreams. "It takes a while to get the dream mix just right for each person," Constance explained. "We can do that for you too, if you'd like. But let's just see how this one takes first, all right?" Sam nodded. "Good. Anything else?" she asked again, looking into Sam's bowl. Sam shrugged, and Constance beckoned him to follow her back to her table where Stu was still grinding. "That should be fine, Stu," she said, taking the mortar and emptying the ground contents into a small square tin. She turned to Sam. "Your turn." She poured the new ingredients into the mortar and pushed it in front of him. "Take your time. The more fine, the more potent." "Grind, grind, till it's fine," said Stu. Constance gave him a little chuckle. Sam took the pestle and pressed it hard down into the mortar. It crunched as it pushed through the herbs and into the grounded bottom. Unusual yet familiar smells triggered memories from so long ago that Sam wondered if they were his. He shook his head, re-gripped the pestle, and pressed as he moved it in circles. While he ground his own tea, Sam got an earful from both Constance and Stu about the town of Forge. There was still an actual metal forge in town, though it was fired up less and less lately. The town had changed industries from iron to lumber almost 100 years ago, but still bore the name of its origin. Now, Forge was known for timber, lots of timber, and it all belonged to a man named Stanchfield, who owned all the land the town was on, as well as the mill and all the land the lumber was being cut from. Stu said Stanchfield owned so much land you could walk clear to Canada without leaving it. Turns out Arthur had saved Stanchfield's life in a snowstorm many years ago, and as repayment, Stanchfield let Arthur not only live on the land, but work it too. The money was split right down the middle. Word got around to other wild men and their witches that there was honest, hidden work in the North Woods, and Stanchfield was soon hosting more and more jacks until they and their kin stuck around long enough to make Forge an established town. All in all, Stanchfield had about 100 people or so that were either working in his woods or in Forge supporting the work in the woods. Outsiders were encouraged to leave, and if they didn't take the hint, found themselves downriver. Anyone that lived in Forge stayed until they left the earth itself. The codes of truth and honor the Jacks lived by gave them purpose right to the end. Those who couldn't stay true were asked to leave, and if they didn't, were told to. Stu didn't say it directly, but Sam got the feeling that Letha and Constance weren't the only two women in town that carried a magical staff. "That should do it," Constance said as she glanced into Sam's mortar. She poured his mix into another tin and labeled both with a grease pencil. Alma and Sam. She handed Sam his and offered the other to Stu. "Drop this one off to Alma on the way out of town," Constance said to Stu. "It'll save me the trip." "Yes, ma'am," said Stu with a smile. Several stops later, and Sam's arms and pelt were full as he and Stu finally started the walk back toward the cabin. He now had trousers, a shirt, the tin from Constance, and 2 loaves of bread. They took the same road back up to the small overlook where Sam got his first view of Forge. As they crested the ridge, Stu turned and looked back. "So that's Forge. Most of it, anyway," he said. He jostled the items he was carrying, piled them onto Sam, and held up the tin with Alma's name on it. "I gotta trot these down to Alma's." Off the knoll, another trail led down to a cabin amongst the trees. It looked to be a little bigger than the one Sam was in. "Should only take a wiggle or two." "Wait," Sam said. He had a question that had been bothering him all day and thought he should ask Stu before they got back to the cabin. "Everyone knows about my proving night?" he asked. "Course they do. It's exciting. There hasn't been one in a long time. None of us regular folk ain't never seen one. I mean, the Jacks and the ladies probably have, but not no one in Forge, so it's exciting, right?" Stu raised an eyebrow at the blank look on Sam's face. "You're excited, right?" Stu asked. "It's less than 2 weeks away." "I don't know," Sam replied. "I don't know what happens. Is the proving like a test?" "I guess, kinda. It's the night you meet your witch." Stu smiled as he turned and walked down the trail, leaving Sam by himself. "My witch?" Sam watched as Stu got smaller on the trail, knocked on the cabin door, stomped the snow off his boots, and stepped inside. Sam stood by himself in the cold, the pelt wrapped around him. His breath rose and matched the smoke that started to spew a little more strongly from the cabin's chimney. A breeze moved the trees. Some of the leafless branches squeaked as they rubbed together. Suddenly, Sam felt very, very alone. Then, he didn't. In his bones, Sam felt something somewhere watching him. In moments, crows filled the trees, yet not one of them made a sound. It seemed impossible that there were so many. Each of their heads was turned so one eye looked at Sam. His spine tingled. All the hair on the pelt stood up. A dark, musty smell filled his nose. "You're welcome," called Stu as he forcefully closed the door to Alma's cabin, spooking the crows into flight. Stu skipped up the hill toward Sam. "Well, that's done," Stu said as he joined Sam. "What are you looking at?" Stu followed Sam's gaze to the disappearing flock. "Whoa, so many!" Sam turned to agree, but his eyes were drawn up into a tree behind Stu. "There's some more right there," Sam said. Stu turned and saw that just above him, in the long bare branches of an oak, more crows jumped from branch to branch. Stu carefully counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 11, Sam interrupted. The crows gave a caw, then spread their wings and followed their brethren into the sky. 11? You sure?" "Pretty sure." I know that 1 is bad and 2 is good, but I don't know about 11. Stu shrugged and started on the wagon trail back toward Sam's cabin. Grandma Letty will tell us. As if on cue, the raven swooped down and landed on Sam's shoulder. She must be checking on us, Stu said. The raven clicked its beak. You can tell her we're almost back. The raven squawked and took off. Stu continued. You like the cabin? I swept it out last week and brought a little wood up. Put some kindling on the stove, too. Sure, Sam replied. He wasn't going to tell Stu that sleeping in the cabin, or anywhere, all alone, was a new experience. The strange dreams he was having didn't make things any better. Is the cabin mine? Is that where I'll be staying from now on? Sam asked. I expect to go out to logging camp once proving night's done, Stu continued. Logging camp? It's where the jacks are, when they're logging. Cutting down trees? Yeah. Is there any other kind of logging? Stu asked sincerely. Sam shrugged. Of course, logging camp ain't just about the logging. Well, it's mostly about the logging, but it's useful for the jacks to stay hidden too. Depending on when and where the moon is, they got different states of fur and such. Out there you don't got to worry about other people seeing when you change, you know? It's easier to stay hidden out there. Why can't I go out there now? Asked Sam. 'Cause you haven't proved yourself yet. Yeah, I know, but why do I have to prove myself? 'Cause it's proving night. Stu didn't understand what Sam didn't understand. You got to prove yourself first. Like, I got to pass a test? Yeah. Stu was relieved that Sam was finally getting it. It's like a test. Did you take the test? Sam asked. I'm not bit, remember? Oh. Sam thought he had at least one piece put together. There were more people like John, only they were all out at logging camp. Sam still had questions. Well, what about everyone else? Everyone in Forge? Asked Sam. Did they know about the jacks, about proving night? Sure do, replied Sam. We're all part of the pact. A pack? Like a pack of wolves? Ha! Pact, laughed Stu. A pact like a deal. Stu thought for a minute. Like a oath. Like keeping your word? Sam asked. Yeah, like keeping your word. How do you get into the pact? Sam asked. You get brought here like John brought you. So John brought you here too? Sam asked. Nah, me and my pa got brought here by Arthur a long time ago. We'd both be dead if it wasn't for him. Arthur was too late to save my ma, though. That's the way my pa tells it anyway. Did your pa get bit too, or did he just get here because of Arthur? Sam asked. He got here because of Arthur. Pa said he'd do anything for Arthur to pay him back for saving his boy. That's me. My pa said he could cook, and Arthur thought that was a fine idea, as they didn't have a proper cook up at the camp at the time. They was just taking turns. So, wait, your pa's at logging camp, but he's not bit? Well, no. So your pa, he didn't have a proving night? No, you only get that if you're bit. But he's a jack? Sam asked. No, he ain't a jack. He ain't bit. He's the cook at logging camp. But I thought only jacks were at logging camp. Well, it's the jack's camp, but my pa's up there too, 'cause he's the cook. But he don't cut no trees. So, is he in the pact? Yeah, now you got it. He's in the pact, like me. So if you're in the pact, or you do the proving night, then you can go out to logging camp? Yep, that's it. Okay, Sam said, though he needed a second to let it all sink in. So the jacks, it's like a secret that everyone knows? Everyone in Forge, Stu clarified. There ain't no secrets when everyone tells the truth. That's the rule of the pact. Always tell the truth. You ain't never lied? Asked Sam. Stu stopped and looked Sam in the eye. No. Sam's gut told him that Stu meant what he said, but something wouldn't square in his head. If you never lied, then how do you keep the secret? Secrets and lies are two different things. You can keep a secret without having to lie. Stu said it with such confidence that Sam didn't question it. You mean Mabel in the bakery? She knows? Of course she does. Rowan saved her a while back. Rom got himself saved by Amasa. Who's Amasa? Best river driver you ever seen. What's a river driving? Sam asked. Driving logs down a river, of course. Sam nodded understanding, even though he didn't. He had more questions, but he wasn't sure any of the answers would make sense. He was glad that Stu started walking again. Soon, Sam's cabin came into view. It's going to be a blue moon, you know, in 13 days, on your proving night, Stu said. That means you'll be extra strong. Stu looked ahead and called out, Hey, Grandma Letty, back before dark, just like I promised. Promised the truth, said Letha. The scar on Sam's arm started to itch. There was crows, Grandma Letty, lots of them, Stu reported. They all took off, then we counted 11. Well, Sam counted 11. 11? What does it mean? Stu asked, wide-eyed. Uncertain. Oh, I thought you'd know. No, Stuart. 11 is uncertain, not sure. Could be bad or good. Well, that ain't no help. Stu wobbled his head in disappointment. Isn't, corrected Letha. Isn't any help. Stu was starting to sound exasperated. It seems we're not the only ones that know about Sam being here. Glad I sent the Raven to check on you. Letha turned to Sam. Let's heat that stove up. It's tea time. Inside, Stu and Sam made quick work of lighting the fire and setting up a single chair for Letha. There's a pot there on the wall. Pull it down and pack it with snow, Letha said. Press it down a few times. A lot of snow is only a little water. Sam pulled a long-handled pot off a nail in the wall, stepped outside, scooped it full of snow, then pressed it down to compact it. He did this several times until he had a full, well-packed pot. Sam placed the pot on the stove and watched the snow melt as the fire took hold. Letha was right. For all the snow he packed into the pot, there was barely an inch of water in the bottom. Sam had to make a few more trips outside before Letha thought there was enough water to add the herbs. That's enough. Now we'll wait until it just starts to bubble, Letha instructed. In the meantime, show me your loot. Stu made a big show of the shirt, trousers, wool coat, tea, and the loaves of bread. Stu laughed as he retold the story of going in and out of Mabel's unseen, even though he was talking with her the whole time. When the telling was done, Letha looked and saw that the bubbles were starting to rise from the bottom of the pot and dance their way to the surface. Let's see that tea, Letha said. Sam produced the tea that Constance had given him. The Sam written on top was a bit smeared from being carried all day. Sam pulled the top off, and the smells from Constance's shop filled his nose again. He handed the tin to Letha, but she waved it away. Go on, she said. You can do it yourself. He brought the tin above the rising steam and slowly spread the ground herbs over the water in a zigzag pattern, enjoying how the boiling bubbles made the herbs jump from side to side. Each herb left a winding trail of color as it sank. Stuart, you want to run along, or you want to teach the lesson on tea? Letha asked. Stu looked at the floor. Aren't so good at teaching, Grandma Letty. Of course you are, Letha replied. You taught Sam a great deal about all the people today, didn't you? You taught him all about town and where to get supplies. He sure did, assured Sam. I was just showing him around. That weren't proper teaching. Wasn't, corrected Letha. And yes, it was. Some of the best teaching and learning need no book at all. She glanced back into the pot. We'll give it a few good minutes, then we'll pour it off, add the syrup, and have a drink. Stu's eyes went wide. Darn, he said. Stuart, you did remember the syrup, didn't you? Asked Letha. We got all the other things done, Grandma Letty, Stu protested. Miss Mabel, Mr. Rom. You did, Letha grinned. Not to worry. It'll work just the same. She made a little face at Sam. Hope you like bitter. Stu hung his head. Sam said the only thing he thought would help. I don't mind bitter. Mama used to say that bitter's good for your heart. Really? Asked Stu. Sure, said Sam. It was the truth. He remembered how his mother used to chew on burdock root and claim it was to help her heart. Sam was happy it seemed to make Stu feel a little better. Sure, it wasn't his favorite, but he didn't hate it either. Sam felt the scar on his arm start to itch more. Maybe it was the heat from the fire, or having 3 people inside the cabin, but he was suddenly feeling very warm. As the sun goes down, the moon will pull on you more and more. You'll feel it, even when it's just a tiny sliver. Letha caught Sam's eye, her look soothing him the same way as when he arrived in Forge. She took her eyes from Sam, and the soothing faded as he felt the heat rise inside himself again. It was similar to the sharpness he experienced earlier with Stu when they first looked over Forge. Now it seemed to be building. I felt it this morning when the moon came up, Sam explained. He said he felt sharp, Stu added. Sure. Now that the sun is down, that sharp will get more and more edgy. Letha raised an eyebrow and smiled as she finished the metaphor. Sharp, edgy, Stu nodded as he returned the smile. How come when you look at me it's better? There's a few tricks in these old bones, Letha said. Since you're feeling so sharp, Let's see if we can make you dull again, huh? Grab a tin cup there and pull a scoop out. Sam took a cup from the shelf above the stove and gently dipped it into the pot. He brought it up to his lips, feeling the steam rise up through his nose before he took a cautious sip. Sam knew what bitter was, but this was something else entirely. He thought that Letha must be playing some kind of joke. There was no way liquid could be so dry. Letha let a little chuckle escape. "I told you it was bitter. How do you feel?" Sam was so preoccupied with the feeling in his mouth that he didn't even notice that the sharpness had eased and he was feeling more himself, even without the stare-down from Letha. "Better," Sam responded. "Sorry about the syrup," said Stu again. "That doesn't look like it tasted very good." "It doesn't taste like anything except dry," said Sam. "I'll get the syrup for you tomorrow," Stu said. "Then it'll be easier to take, for sure." "Well, I can't imagine it being any worse," Sam thought.